The moment Conan O'Brien walked onto the voice stage with his trademark lanky charm and infectious energy, everyone expected an evening of pure comedic gold. But what nobody in that studio was prepared for was witnessing one of America's most beloved late-night hosts completely shatter on live television, proving that sometimes the tallest comedians fall the hardest when their carefully constructed walls finally crumble. What happened next will show you that behind every brilliant smile is sometimes a darkness that comedy can mask but never fully heal. Subscribe now because this moment will reveal the hidden battle that one of our funniest entertainers has been fighting his entire career. Conan had come to The Voice that Wednesday evening for what was supposed to be a hilarious celebrity guest segment. The producers had invited him to participate in a comedy sketch with 20-year-old Jake Morrison, a talented but overly serious young singer from Boston who needed help loosening up and connecting with audiences on an emotional level. The plan was perfectly suited to Conan's strengths. Use his natural wit and self-deprecating humor to help Jake understand that vulnerability and authenticity were more important than technical perfection. Maybe throw in some of his famous physical comedy and create the kind of memorable television moment that would help both the show and Jake's confidence. Jake had chosen to perform an introspective ballad about feeling lost and disconnected in the modern world. It was supposed to be a meaningful but manageable performance that would benefit from Conan's guidance about finding lightness even in serious subject matter. Conan sat in the red coach chair that had been set up for him, chatting with his usual rapid-fire wit with Blake Shelton about Jake's upcoming performance. His energy was electric as always, filling the studio with the kind of manic positivity that had made him a late-night television legend for over 2 decades. "Jake reminds me of myself when I was starting out," Conan told Blake with his characteristic self-deprecating grin, taking everything way too seriously, thinking that being profound meant being miserable. Sometimes the best way to touch people's hearts is to not be afraid to make them laugh first. Blake was clearly enjoying Conan's perspective and infectious enthusiasm. That's exactly what this kid needs to hear. He's got all the talent in the world, but he's so worried about being taken seriously that he's forgotten music is supposed to make people feel something. As Jake took the stage, Conan leaned forward with genuine interest, ready to offer the kind of encouragement and insight that could help transform a good performer into a great one. His pale, expressive face was animated with anticipation and supportive energy. Jake began to sing, his voice rich and technically skilled, as he delivered lyrics about isolation, confusion, and the feeling that the world had become a place where genuine connection seemed impossible. His performance was competent, but emotionally distant, exactly the kind of careful, guarded approach that Conan was there to help him move beyond. Conan was nodding and making encouraging gestures, clearly impressed by Jake's vocal ability, but also recognizing the emotional barriers that were keeping the performance from being truly powerful. But as Jake continued singing about feeling trapped in darkness and unable to find hope, something began to shift in Conan's expression. The lyrics about sleepless nights, about feeling worthless, about wanting to disappear from a world that seemed too painful to navigate, were triggering memories that Conan had spent decades learning to manage but never fully conquering. Conan's animated gestures slowed, then stopped entirely. His trademark smile began to fade as Jake's words about depression and hopelessness reached something deep and vulnerable in Conan's psyche that he had worked his entire career to keep hidden behind layers of humor and manic energy. "I used to feel so alone, like the world would be better off without me," Jake sang, unaware that his lyrics were hitting Conan like physical blows. Suddenly, Conan's carefully constructed public persona began to crumble. His pale skin went even whiter, his hands began to shake, and his usually bright eyes filled with tears that seemed to come from somewhere very deep and very painful. "I can't," Conan whispered, his voice breaking in a way that his millions of fans had never heard. This is bringing back too much." Jake, still performing, noticed Conan's distress, and his own voice began to waver as he saw the usually animated comedian sitting motionless, tears streaming down his face. The comedy segment was turning into something much darker and more complex than anyone had anticipated. Conan tried to stand up from his chair, but his legs buckled beneath him. The emotional impact of Jake's lyrics about depression, combined with the memories of his own darkest periods, caused him to collapse onto the stage floor, his tall frame folding in on itself as decades of suppressed pain finally found its way to the surface. "I used to lock myself in my room for days," Conan gasped, his voice barely recognizable without its usual comedic timing and energy, "thinking I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything, that everyone would be better off if I just disappeared." Blake immediately signaled for the music to stop and was moving toward the stage before anyone else could react, recognizing that something profound and unexpected was happening to one of entertainment's most beloved figures. "Conan," Blake said gently as he reached him, "talk to us, man. What's going on in your head right now?" Conan was now sobbing openly, his usual comic armor completely stripped away to reveal the vulnerable, frightened person underneath. In college, in my 20s, even after I got successful, there were times when I couldn't get out of bed for weeks, when comedy felt like the only thing keeping me alive, but even that wasn't always enough. The studio had fallen completely silent as everyone processed what they were witnessing. This was Conan O'Brien, the man who had made late-night television appointment viewing for millions, the comedian who seemed incapable of taking anything seriously, revealing that he had been fighting clinical depression for most of his adult life. Blake knelt beside Conan, understanding that this moment required the kind of genuine human connection that transcended entertainment. "Conan, how long have you been carrying this alone?" "Since I was 19, Conan replied, his voice shaking. "I had my first major episode in college. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't see any point in continuing. Comedy became my lifeline, but also my mask. If I could make other people laugh, maybe I could convince myself that I was worth something." Blake felt his own emotions rising as he realized the courage it had taken for Conan to build a career on joy while fighting such darkness internally. "Conan, you've brought happiness to millions of people. You've helped families laugh together, helped people through difficult times. But that's just it," Conan said, his words coming faster now as the dam had completely broken. "I became a professional at hiding pain behind laughter. Every joke, every bit, every silly dance was me running from the voice in my head that told me I wasn't good enough, that I was a fraud, that eventually everyone would figure out that I was just a sad, broken person pretending to be funny." Kelly Clarkson, watching from her chair, was crying openly. "Conan, depression lies to us. It tells us we're worthless when we're actually valuable beyond measure." John Legend added, his voice thick with emotion. "The fact that you fought this battle while bringing so much joy to others shows incredible strength, not weakness." Jake, still standing at the microphone, was watching the scene unfold with his own eyes full of tears. "Mr. O'Brien," he said quietly, "I wrote that song during my own dark period. Maybe we're not as alone as we think we are." Conan looked up at Jake, seeing his own struggle reflected in the young man's eyes. "How do you get through it?" Conan asked. "How do you find hope when your own brain is telling you there isn't any?" "Music," Jake replied simply, "and knowing that if I can feel this deeply, maybe I can help other people feel less alone in their darkness." Conan wiped his eyes, beginning to compose himself, but still visibly shaken. "I've spent my entire career using humor as a shield, making jokes so I wouldn't have to deal with the sadness, keeping everyone laughing so they wouldn't see how much I was hurting." Blake helped Conan stand up slowly. "Conan, there's nothing wrong with using humor as a coping mechanism. You turned your pain into something that helps others. That's not hiding from your depression, that's fighting it." "But what happens when the laughter stops?" Conan asked, his voice still fragile. "What happens when I'm alone with my thoughts and there's no audience to perform for?" Blake looked directly into Conan's eyes. then you remember that the person who created all that laughter, who brought all that joy to the world, that person is valuable and loved, even in the quiet moments, even in the darkness. Blake turned to address the entire studio. Ladies and gentlemen, what we just witnessed is what courage looks like. Conan has been fighting an invisible battle while making the rest of us laugh. That's not being fake, that's being heroic. Conan looked around the studio at all the faces filled with understanding and compassion rather than judgment or pity. I never wanted people to know, he said quietly. I was afraid that if audiences knew I was depressed, they wouldn't find me funny anymore. Conan, Blake replied, the fact that you can create joy while fighting sadness doesn't make you a fraud. It makes you a warrior, and it makes every laugh you've created even more meaningful. Jake approached them both, still emotional from his own performance and from witnessing Conan's vulnerability. Mr. O'Brien, would you mind if I sang that song again? But this time, maybe we could sing it together. Maybe it could be about finding hope instead of just describing darkness. Conan looked at Jake with surprise, then something that might have been relief. You'd want to sing with me, even after this? Especially after this, Jake replied, because now I know you understand what that song is really about. And maybe together we can show people that you can acknowledge darkness without being consumed by it. As Jake began to sing again, but this time with Conan's voice joining in, the song transformed from a description of despair into something more complex, a recognition of struggle that also contained the possibility of hope, community, and healing. Their voices blended in a way that highlighted both the darkness they had experienced and the strength they had found to continue creating despite it. The performance became a testament to the idea that acknowledging pain doesn't mean surrendering to it. When they finished, the applause was different from anything the voice had ever experienced. It wasn't just appreciation for a performance. It was recognition of courage, vulnerability, and the kind of authentic human connection that can happen when people stop pretending to be perfect. Conan addressed the studio with his voice still shaky, but growing stronger. I came here tonight thinking I was going to help a young performer loosen up and have fun. Instead, Jake helped me realize that I don't have to choose between being honest about my struggles and bringing joy to others. Maybe the most helpful thing I can do is show people that it's possible to fight depression and still find reasons to laugh. The segment became one of the most shared and discussed moments in television history, sparking conversations about mental health, about the masks that entertainers wear, and about the courage it takes to create joy while fighting internal battles. Conan later said that the experience changed his approach to both comedy and life. I realized that night that my depression didn't make me less funny. It made my humor more necessary, both for me and for other people who need to laugh through their own darkness, because sometimes the funniest people are fighting the hardest battles, sometimes the greatest comedy comes from the deepest pain, and sometimes acknowledging our darkness is the first step toward helping others find light in theirs.